kind of sitting in the main Sunday service about 6 months ago, I think. I thought, okay, that would make an interesting talk. And it's quite connected to kind of, I guess I was thinking about it because it's what I kind of do in my day job as well. There's lots of planning. So I thought, let's see if I can bring the two together. So a bit about me. So blessed with 3 children. So Dawn there, obviously. And then 3 children currently in Sunday school. And so we've been blessed for 14 years now. And
that's a long time.
It is a long time. And our oldest child, Raina's turning 11 soon, and the youngest, Gwenny, is 7. And then I said here I did 2 years of STF in 2008. That's even longer ago. What, 18 years ago? Well, yeah, roughly. So yeah, very long time ago. I did 2 years, and most of that was travelling around Europe, fundraising and witnessing in Albania, witnessing London for 6 months, and I sort of spent about 6 months in Canada fundraising. So yeah, it was quite a good time for me to kind of help build my faith and understand what I believe and set a good foundation for the future. And so what I do now, so officially I'm a project manager. That's what I do as a day job. I did qualify as a barrister, so that was 2013, 2014. But since then I've been working in project management, so I kind of went from that to being on site wearing masks and try not to get hit by a big piece of equipment. And then third picture is kind of more what I look like now-ish, on a good day. And yeah, so not so much the site-based stuff anymore, but very much kind of planning and putting together longer-term projects and things that happen in the future. And also, in terms of what I'm doing at the moment, in terms of volunteering for the church, I'm currently on the finance committee and kind of contribute in that way. So that's a bit about me and where I kind of come from. Now, question, why do we plan? Any thoughts? Just in general, in life, why do we plan?
To prepare.
To prepare? Yeah. Any other thoughts?
To structure our time.
Structure time, absolutely.
To have a direction.
Yeah, have a direction. Anything else? No? Okay, that's fine. Put Gantt chart there. If you don't know what that is, it's a project management thing. Project management tool just to kind of work out what order things are happening and when things need to happen. And yeah, it's what I spend a lot of my time doing and looking at. But why do we plan? To achieve a goal. Work out if anything's missing. So actually you put a plan together and you think, okay, I want to get there. But sometimes without a plan you don't realise, oh, I might need this. Or so if you're planning an event, okay, that's what we want to do, yes, the event's going to happen. And then when you put your plan together, we need food, we need facility, we need people to help. All those things, when you're putting a plan together, it helps you work out if anything's missing. Also, understand how much time we need. So, okay, it's one thing saying, I want to organise an event tomorrow, but actually you might not have enough time to do that, everything for tomorrow. Do it in 6 months, maybe that's too long. So, kind of different aspects of planning, but really it's to kind of set out what you want to achieve and how you're going to get there. So, do you make time for Heavenly Parent? Anyone?
Try to.
Try to? Yeah. Day-to-day life, do you try and make time for Heavenly Parent? So, yeah, who actually sets out time for God? The reality is we all get busy. So often we start the day, we have great intentions, yes, I'm going to make time for God today. We don't actually have a clear plan. And we all get busy. Something comes along, I've got to do that, I've got to do that, that looks interesting, I'll go do that. And then you realise, you get to the end of the day, you realise time to sleep and actually you haven't dedicated that specific time for God. And that's the reality. And so if you don't plan and make time, things get forgotten, especially they require effort. Imagine if you're at school, you're doing that, you've got some homework you've got to do. Do you do it as soon as you get it? Are you really diligent? The moment you get home, first day getting that homework, or do you leave it to the end of the week when it's due in, maybe after it's due in? Is it one of these things that that requires effort? Do you do it later than you should do? And and often that happens with God. You know, it requires a bit more effort. And you think, oh, okay, I'll do that tomorrow, or I'm going to start a condition, I'll start it tomorrow. But often things that take effort get forgotten or delayed, and it's often what's the easy way out. You know, kind of if you're looking from an evil spirit world point of view, what they're trying to do is try and give you the easy way out. Oh, you can just do it another time. Focus on something nice now. And so therefore, yeah, often gets forgotten. And actually, True Father had a quote about this. Well, actually, there's lots of quotes we'll come up through in a minute, but from the moment we wake up in the morning until we close our eyes and go to sleep at night, God should be at the forefront of our heart, mind, and actions. And so that's a quote from True Father, and he's really kind of emphasising that we really need to have a plan for God in our lives. You know, God should really be at the centre of everything we do. You know, right from the morning to the evening. It's not just a little piece of time you kind of squirrel away, or if I have time, I'll focus about God. It should be at the centre of everything we do. So how can we do that? Kind of from a practical point of view, how can we make time for Heavenly Parent in our day? You can make time for 100k. So you can say, okay, I'm going to wake up from this time to this time, I'm going to do 100k. Or make time for prayer. In our family, for example, every day before we go to sleep, we will dedicate some time for 100k before we go to sleep. Even if it's just one page, you know, at least you've got that dedicated, clear time that you're setting aside. This is time for God. Practical example, if you're tithing, actually, the physical act of tithing is already making time for Heavenly Parent. You're taking time out to do that, and you're kind of putting God first in what you're doing. Sunday service attendance, the fact that we're all here today is making time for Heavenly Parent. So, and including God in your interaction with others. So, yes, you can kind of break your day into chunks and say, okay, I'm going to put time for God here, put time for God here. But actually, even when you're interacting with others, are you thinking, how is God working through this interaction? And actually doing that is already making time for God. So, you know, that is a really good example about how we can really engage with God in our interactions. Now that was all kind of shorter term. So that's kind of thinking more practically how we can get God in our days. What is your plan in life? So for me, my general plan in life, support children and family through good schools to help them set them up for life whilst rooted in a deep relationship with Heavenly Parents, develop to be a leader in my field where I'm helping others to grow and contribute to society. That's kind of a longer term goal, what I want to achieve with my life. The reason I like this photo, one, it's all of us together, it's good. We're all working, we're all just finishing Taekwondo. And the thing I like about that is you've got a goal. You want to get to your black belt, but you can't get there overnight. And actually what we're doing, we're working together as a family in different stages. So it kind of represents that a little bit, working together. We've got a longer term plan, but we've got some small steps to get there before we get there. And with this, so with this goal, that's where I want to get in the future, but actually to get there are lots of little steps to get there. You know, that's just not going to happen overnight. That's going to require a lot of effort. For example, last week, I had a really boring finance thing to do, but I decided to plan out the next 20 years of our income and work out what can we afford for the next 20 years. And to sort of assess things like, actually, do I need to change how we're doing things? Do I need to, change how much I'm earning, how much we're spending? Are we going to be able to afford what we want? No joke, I've got a big spreadsheet that has 20 years of financing on it. So that's that, and actually we're kind of looking at, okay, if we want to put the children through a good school, they need to prepare for that. It's not a case of saying, okay, great school, let's just go there. Actually, there's steps to prepare for that, there's steps to plan and develop. And then with my career, again, it's not a case of, okay, I want to be the best, I want to be a director. Okay, yes, I want to do that in the future, but actually, how do I get there? If I kind of look through my career history, there's probably been sort of every year and a half, 2 years or so, I've kind of moved on to a different role. And it's because each one of those is kind of a small step to kind of get me to where I want to get. So the idea is, we have plans in our lives, so this is kind of an example of my plan and kind of how I want to get there. I guess, who else has a plan in life? Who else has a goal in life?
I do.
What's your plan?
I want to get my kids blessed. That's my number one.
Anyone else have a plan for what they want in life?
I have a goal.
What's your goal?
I mean, on more external side, I want to be a pediatrician, but yeah, I'm still in the middle of planning the route I want to take to get there.
So you have that end goal, you want to be a paediatrician. There's a few different ways you can get there,
Yeah.
but you're just kind of trying to work that out at the moment.
Mm.
Good. Anyone else have a goal or a plan?
Not very defined.
Okay. So that's something. So it's good to have plans in life just generally, and I'll come to a quote in a second about that actually. But it's good to have a plan in life. But what is your plan for your relationship with Heavenly Parent? So even my goal, yes, I mentioned about Heavenly Parent and there with children, but it is still relatively external in terms of actually I want to go through schools, career and things like that. But actually, what is your longer term plan for Heavenly Parent, for your relationship with Heavenly Parent? Sorry, I should make that a bit bigger. I'll read this out. But so, Heavenly Parent works when there is a plan, a goal, or a destination. And I'll read out these quotes because they are a bit small. So this quote from True Father, The Way of the Original Mind. Without having a blueprint for your future, you cannot lead your life successfully. While in your 20s, you have to establish precise goals and invest your whole energy and heart to fulfill them. Before a ship sets out on a voyage, navigators have to decide the course and direction of the ship and precisely measure the settings with a compass. Then they must start the engine and the propeller must begin to turn. I thought it was a great quote from True Father talking about just general life skill, actually having a goal, you've got to set it out, before you start. But interesting, because it's coming from True Father, you've got to also got to think, whenever True Father spoke, yes, he offered really great advice for life, but also actually, what is the meaning behind it? Why is he saying this? And actually, you can apply that to your relationship with God as well. Actually, what is your plan? Where do you want to achieve your goal with True Parents? I'll read this one again because it's a small one. So this is from True Mother. Then what should be done to make this happen? We must throw away all self-centered excuses. We must have a clear goal and be able to advance a step closer to the goal, even in our sleep. Whether or not you stand in a position of eternal blessing in the eternal world will depend on how widely and greatly you transform your surroundings. Will you neglect your responsibilities because of present difficulties? So again, with True Mother, what she's saying here is actually you've got to think, where do you want to go? What is the goal? And actually, all your actions should be geared towards that. You're saying even in your sleep. And again, you can't really do that unless you actually have that plan for where you want to get to. And then another quote from True Mother, and this one's actually a little bit more practical. Because often we can read these these quotes and things all very grand and theoretical. But kind of a very practical quote from True Mother is, we need to make Korea the fatherland and root of heart where people want to come to visit and live. That's why I'm systematically planning to make a tourism project in Korea. Not by rule of thumb, but by a long-term plan for the future. I will unfold the tourism project in Korea. We ourselves need to do this too, so that people in the world come to beautiful Korea and attend True Parents who are the root of heart and receive education. So again, very practical, talking about, okay, we want to build these things, create tourism projects in Korea, bring people to Korea. And it just shows that actually even within True Parents' lives, they're really thinking about the future and the plan, and physically how do we get there, practically how we get there. So absolutely, we have these external goals, that's a good thing. Actually then God can work in that. Because ultimately, why is True Mother saying that? So yes, we're going to make a tourism industry. But then she talks about the reason at the end there is idea of, okay, make this a place that people want to come, and then when people come to Korea, actually, they can receive education, we can build their hearts. So again, it's kind of thinking about where you want to get to in the future, building that homeland, building that practical, physical world where we can invite True Parents and Heavenly Parent to be with us in it. So, what is your plan for your relationship with Heavenly Parent? Creating this plan, that's your 5% responsibility. When you have a longer term plan, Heavenly Parent and ancestors know where to invest the energy. So if you know someone's working towards something, so for example, we see a GoFundMe page. People have a goal, they want to achieve that. Okay, great. You now looking at that know, that person, they need some money, they want to achieve that. If I donate to that, I'm helping them achieve that goal. It's exactly the same with Heavenly Parent, except as opposed to saying, I want to receive £100, you're saying, I want to develop this part of my relationship with God. And you're effectively giving a map to Heavenly Parent to say, look, this is where I need help, and you're kind of opening the path for them to get involved. And this is your 5%. We talk about the 5% responsibility and Heavenly Parent as the 95%. And this really, all we have to do is set up that plan, really work out where we want, and then God and Heavenly Parent will provide the opportunities. So what does a longer term plan for your relationship with Heavenly Parent look like? What are some examples of that? So I put a few ideas up here. So one, just having a longer term knowledge and understanding of the DP. So you really want to understand divine principle and true parents' teachings in depth. So you can, and you want to understand it so then you can then teach. You can kind of offer that to other people. That's an idea of kind of a longer term goal. You can't learn the principle overnight. You can't learn the collective works of true parents' teachings overnight. I know, because my computer at home is currently running a big AI analysis of all of tparents.org, and there's about 71,000 files on there. It's taking 2 days for it just to analyse everything and categorise it. There is a lot out there. But actually, so the goal might be I want to have a really detailed knowledge of true parents' teachings, so you can teach other people. It's not an overnight thing. Actually think, okay, this is where I want to be in 2 years' time. I want to say know the principle inside out, so I can then teach people. So that's an example of a longer term goal. Finding and raising spiritual children. Again, not an overnight thing. We're lucky in this community, we've had a few new people join over the last few years. Again, those weren't overnight things. That's a really good spiritual goal. And actually that was kind of the goal that true parents were setting almost as a foundation to go to the blessing in the past. But finding and raising spiritual children. But really that's the goal you want to get to. And how do you do that? One step along that journey might be developing your understanding of the principle, for example, or developing your ability to teach the principle, or for some people who can't teach the principle, just learning how to look after people. And there's lots of little steps you can do that, and then there's going out and seeing. How do you approach someone? Do you just approach someone completely randomly? Do you kind of target who you're going to approach? Do you stand in a certain place where you might find more people? There's a whole path to get there. End goal is to develop that spiritual child, but how do you get there? There's a path to get there. Another one, maybe a little bit closer to home, developing that relationship with your parents. Again, that's a lifelong thing. And actually, if you intentionally want to develop that relationship with your parents are your direct connection to Heavenly Parent. So actually developing that relationship is in itself a goal, is in itself an objective. And there are steps on that journey as well. Often when you kind of get to as you're kind of developing your teens, your early 20s, a lot of people kind of can lose touch with their parents a bit or not quite understand them. And you see it all over, the kind of, not conflicts, but the tensions, say, between first and second generation, with older people, younger people, because everyone's got different priorities. But actually developing that relationship with parents is crucial. And there are many steps you can do that as well. It could be a case of, just sitting down with them, playing a game with them, actually just spending time. And that's the first step, okay, just bridging that gap. Then the next step might be, okay, having a longer conversation with them, going out for coffee with them. I remember after SDF, on SDF we had these things called sharings. And that's kind of every couple of weeks your team leader would take you out and you'd sit down and you'd discuss, okay, what's going on, how are you feeling? And I kind of got to the end of SDF and thought, I've never really actually done this with my parents. I've never actually gone out for a couple of hours, just one-on-one, sit down, had a coffee and talked. So I came back from SDF and I was really excited, I'm going to have a sharing with my parents. Very cheesy, but anyway, it worked. So that's another thing, there's steps you can go on that journey. Now, when I was thinking about this, you hear a lot of people say, well, I don't want to plan too much because it doesn't allow for freedom, it doesn't allow for things to happen naturally. And I like this quote, no plan survives contact with the enemy. It's been interpreted in different ways over the years, but effectively the idea is you have a plan. So let's say you're going into battle, you have a plan about how you're going to do that battle in the olden days. But in reality, the moment you start that battle, you get to where you want to do that plan, it all falls apart because you can't predict how everything's going to act. Even my projects, I've got a really detailed plan. Okay, on this day, at this hour, we're going to do this. An hour later, we're going to do this. 2 days later, we're going to do this. In reality, things don't work like that. Okay, a delivery I'm expecting is 3 hours late. I need to put things in a lift to take them to the top floor of a building I'm working on. The lift breaks that afternoon. Real example. It's happened just a couple of weeks ago for me. But suddenly, the plan doesn't work anymore. So actually, what's the point of planning in the first place? The weather's not what you were expecting. You've got a plan for the day, you're going to go to the park, see some friends. Okay, it's raining. Okay, plans ruined. You get a bad night's sleep, you just don't feel up for it in the morning. How many times that happens? You've got something you want to do, don't sleep very well, you wake up in the morning, do I really want to do that? Do I really want to come to church today? Do I really want to go to that place today? Or someone else gets that opportunity you were hoping for. So if, for example at school, or particularly when you're at work, you might be going for a promotion or a job, and someone else gets the opportunity and you were kind of banking on that, or getting into a certain university. You might have been banking on that, but maybe it doesn't quite work out. So things happen in reality. So, does planning potentially restrict the opportunity of having a parent work? That's something I have heard in the past. So why do we bother? If we know it's not going to go as expected, why do we bother planning in the first place? But the reality is, planning, even if you know it's not going to work out, puts you in the best position possible to actually succeed. So, kind of a football analogy. In a football team, everyone has individual skills. Some people might be excellent, some people might be rubbish, but actually when they work together, that's how you kind of achieve your goal. And actually the aim of that is to score goals and win. And there are lots of different ways to do that. And actually in the football training, yes, you're developing your individual skills, but actually what you're doing is you're working out how to work together, how to kind of, what kind of formations to use, who to pass to who, how to react to different circumstances. And doing that practice and having that plan, you've got the end goal, but you've got lots of different ways of getting there. It means you can react to what's happening. It means when something does hit you that wasn't expected, you've actually got an alternative plan to get there. You've got an alternative way of getting there. The end goal is still the same, but how you get there is different. So it happens in football all the time. It allows you to replan and adapt. And actually, because you've already done all that thinking in the background, and moving away from football, but if you for example, your paediatrician goal, that's where you want to get to, and there might be different ways to do that. Because as part of that, you've already thought about actually what the end goal is and all the different ways of getting there. If something happens, you don't need to start from scratch again in terms of doing all that planning. You actually know, well, actually if I just go this way and do something slightly different in this regard, it'll still get you to that end goal. So it allows you to plan and replan and adapt. And going back to my kind of project management hat here, you have risks and opportunities. So what happens is when you're planning, you've got a plan and you think, okay, well, this can go wrong, this can go wrong, this can go wrong. And what you already start doing is already preparing for that eventuality. So, so that's risks. Things go wrong, and actually, you've got ultimate different ways of getting there. There's also opportunities, actually. So when you're planning a project, you think, okay, if everything goes wrong, this is going to happen. But actually, what happens if things go well? What happens if we planned to buy a certain item and suddenly it's 10% cheaper? Great. We're saving some money. We can spend money on other things. But the idea is that planning in advance gives you the opportunity to understand how all these things can fit into what you're doing. And a clear goal helps inform decision making. So if you've got a clear goal, you know where you want to get to, and suddenly you've got a decision that you need to make. Something changes, and okay, do I choose this option? Do I choose this option? If you've got that goal at the end, you can then look at those options and understand which one is actually aligned with where I want to go. Which one's going to help me get to that end goal? As opposed to saying, oh well, that one looks shinier or that one looks quicker. It's actually what is going to get me to my end goal. And it can be seen in the principle of restoration as well. Even God's plans don't work as expected, but there's still an end goal to work towards. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here now. We wouldn't have the Messiah on the earth. And if you look at all the times in the Bible when all the different people failed or things happened, Jesus went to the cross. That wasn't the original plan, but still we're here now. That's because God has a plan. It's in the principle of restoration, principle of creation, and then the principle of restoration. That's God's plan. That's how we kind of get there. So, final quote, and I like this quote. It's 3 parts, and it kind of goes through what we've just been talking about. It's a quote from True Father. So, we're all working to advance God's providence and fulfill His will. Can you sacrifice yourself for one entire day, morning to night? Right now you might say yes, but at noon you might change your mind. That's kind of what I was saying earlier. Actually, you might have a really good idea to start with, but then the day goes on and suddenly you lose interest. So actually having that kind of clear plan, setting that time aside, it's so important, and to kind of be able to stick to it. Since we have only one life, How will we spend it? One type of person knows his mission clearly and devotes each day to its fulfillment. The other type of person has a vague idea of his mission, so he just lives one day at a time. And again, so kind of back to the second point, thinking about long term, where do we want to get to? What is the ultimate goal? And actually, once you've got that ultimate goal, planning what you do in a day becomes easier. Because you know where you want to get to, then you're kind of going through, okay, my plan for today, okay, I've got to do X, Y, and Z, but actually, how am I going to align that with my ultimate goal? Maybe I need to take out that hour to read the Divine Principle. Maybe I need to take out that hour to speak to my parents. So have that end goal. And the final part of the quote, we should eagerly await the dawn of each day so we can jump up to work. So it's kind of that point about things change. But beginning of each day, you can jump up to work. Okay, what opportunities do I have today? But ultimately, if it lines up with your ultimate goal and what you're going to do, dedicating time for your day, you can actually plan to include God in your life. Plan to include Heavenly Parent in your day and your life, and then respond and really make Him proud. And that's it. So, discussions?
Yes.
Thank you.
Give a round of applause to our speaker. Okay. I want to give us an opportunity to reflect on what we just heard. Wonderful and many pieces of wisdom there. I hope we can take everything. So yeah, let's take a few minutes of reflection and then we'll get into discussion groups.